So welcome back to visual programming. I think I shared previous videos on how we can be able to use HTML, um, and basically the elements and the forms is what I was interested in, and how you can really publish your content using HTML. I think most of us have looked into that because those are the building blocks that we're going to use when it comes to creating our user interface, which is a very important of this discussion. So, as I said, welcome back to this course, and I'm hoping that you had thoroughly looked at HTML. You have understood how we use HTML to build a few user interfaces like forms, login forms, and all that. I think you also looked at how you can be able to integrate Bootstrap. Though you have not looked at Bootstrap in a greater detail, but we're going to use it for purposes of styling when it comes to writing our code because we also don't want to start writing code from scratch. Our focus on this particular user interface is JavaScript. So today I want us to go right into JavaScript and see what it is and what it can do. Now, JavaScript is referred to as the language of the internet. What that means is that you use JavaScript for anything over the internet. So what it means is that previously JavaScript was designed to run inside a browser. Now, that might not be the case at the moment because we have something like Node.js, which allows you to run JavaScript outside the browser. We have embedded JavaScript in things like microwave radios, video games, and so forth and so forth. So, literally, JavaScript, in as much as it was designed as a language of the internet, nowadays it's technically a language that can run anywhere. And the syntax is more or less the same. So once you learn how to use JavaScript on the web, you're good to go when it comes to running JavaScript outside the web using libraries like Electron. A very classic example is Visual Studio Code. The code editor that you're using here, this code editor that we're using here, is actually designed using JavaScript and a library called Electron. Just those two. So you can see how powerful as a language JavaScript can be. This has been used to design that. So we're going to see how to use it. Of course, I'm not expecting you to create Visual Studio Code like application, but of course you could. Why not? But what's very important is for us to be able to understand how we can actually use JavaScript as far as visual programming is concerned. It's visual because we're going to create our user interface, we're going to create logic, we are going to apply a few things here and there, then we'll see how that works out. Yeah, somebody mentioned something on the chat. Let me just find. So somebody says video number two does not play. Okay, I'm not sure about that. I'll probably check it. Nobody else complained about it, but okay, well, I'll have a look at it and see how that works out. I can still see some more people are coming in. I thought we were done with admitting people. All right. So as I had mentioned, we are going to use JS or JavaScript for various things. So I'll share my screen so that you can be able to follow on how this works out. Are you able to see my screen? I hope so. I think we are dealing with something called VP. So I'll go to more. I'll go to visual programming. So literally, this is where our code is. Um, and I think I'd also introduced a bit of JavaScript for the other group. Did you have any other video that introduced JavaScript? Did you have a video that introduced JavaScript? Amongst the videos that you looked at, any that introduced JavaScript? Maybe what is JavaScript? Maybe what can it do? What types are there? How do we integrate it into our documents? How do we output the contents of JavaScript and that kind of a thing? Did we look at that? Is there any video that showed us how to go about that? Because I'm looking at the course folder and I'm seeing that there was a bit of introduction on the same. Well, um, Joy, now that you're the class rep,
Yes.
the any of the videos that we looked at, is there any that introduced JavaScript? Like what is JavaScript? What
Um,
can it do? How do we
n-
add it to our
no,
application? How do we output its content and that kind of a thing? There was no video covering that. I want to know so that I know what to move to next, so I don't cover what you've already covered. Okay, I'll assume that is a no, so I'll start from scratch. So I just discard this hello world JavaScript file over here.
no.
No. Okay. So I'll just discard that hello world and I will get a new file here and I'll call it intro to js.html. So this is introduction to JavaScript. So I'll put Emmet here and I'll say this is introduction to JavaScript. All right. So I'll put a comment here. We know how to put HTML comments. I think we've looked at this in detail. So um, what is JavaScript? And I'll call it JS moving forward because JavaScript is a little bit too much of a mouthful to say. So I'll be referring to it as JS moving forward. I can hear some people are still trying to come in. I think I'll stop admitting people now. It's way past time, and even if you're to come late in class, 30 minutes is a little bit too much. So as I mentioned, JavaScript is um, just hold on a second. So JavaScript, as I said, this is it's not a compiled language. Actually, it's a translated language. So this is a translated high-level language used to animate web pages. Now, this was initially what it was supposed to do, but of course, as I've mentioned, now it no longer runs inside the browser alone. So initially, it was supposed to run inside the browser alone, and for a very long time, up to 2013, JavaScript 2009 rather, JavaScript was primarily running inside a browser. But of course, there's a very brilliant guy called Ryan Dahl. He wrote a C++ compiler, and using the Chrome V8 engine, he was able to allow us to now run JavaScript outside the browser using the compiled C++ language, which enables us now to be able to interact with JavaScript outside the browser. So, in as much as you're going to be using it inside the browser for now, just keep in mind that JavaScript was right now can be used outside the browser. So it is when it comes to programs, there are two types of programs. You have what you call a compiled program, and you have what you call a translated program. A compiled program is like Visual Studio Code. So you install it inside your machine, like TeamViewer here. This is a compiled program. Then when I run it, it simply just runs off from my computer directly. So the source code is compiled into what we call an executable, like what we have over here. So that's one type of program. Now, the other type of program is JavaScript. and is translated rather. And JavaScript is an example of the translated program. So how does translation work? It means that the browser will translate line by line and execute as it goes by. So it will load the contents of the file, then execute line by line. So compilation is not done beforehand. Of course, there are disadvantages to that, to compiling, to pre-compile versus translated languages, but that's not going to be our focus for today because already JavaScript is not a compiled language, it's a translated language. We're going to work with it as such. Okay, so what can JavaScript do? What can you do with JavaScript? Literally anything. So, but of course, we look at primarily what it was designed to do, then we'll see how we can implement those things that it was designed to do. So, what can JS do? And it's a lot of things. One, it can be used to validate page content. And this is very huge. Initially, what used to happen is that whenever you wanted to change something, you need to reload the whole page. But if you look at programs or apps that you have right now, like Facebook and Gmail and Yahoo, or any large application, it doesn't necessarily need to refresh to be able to show you the contents of the application. So what happens is it can allow you to validate the page contents. So whenever a user provides content, something like maybe username or password, you can check if that content is okay and that kind of stuff. Number two, so that's content validation. Number two, JavaScript allows you to refresh the page or um, it allows you to change only portions of a page. So with JavaScript, if I have a whole page and I only wanted to change a small content of the page, I can basically do that. A very classic example is like Gmail. Whenever I receive a new email from Gmail, it will just tell you there's a new email and it will pop the email at the top. That is JavaScript working in the background. So previously we needed to refresh the whole page so that we can be able to see the changes that have occurred in the page. But with JavaScript now, we are able actually to change a portion of a page only. You're going to see that. Now, the other thing about JavaScript is that it allows us to have animation. So allows animation, sorry. Three, it allows us to create animations on web pages. Again, this is not restricted to web pages as I've mentioned. JavaScript can run outside the browser. But of course, if I'm running it outside the browser, mostly I'm running it for APIs like Express and things like that. But nonetheless, it still is able to run outside browser, so it allows us to be able to create animations on web pages. So when you see animations on web pages like things moving from left to right, things popping up, colors changing, and all that, that is how JavaScript allows you to do animation on your web pages. Now, also, JavaScript allows you to fetch remote data, and this is very powerful. So, allows fetching remote data. What that means is that using APIs or using the Fetch API, I can easily get data from an external source, then I can be able to consume it within my app or website. That's very powerful. Say a case in point, let's say for example, I'm writing a program to show weather. I don't want to collect the weather data, but I have people who are collecting weather data. What I would basically do is using the Fetch API, I can collect weather data, then I display that content on my page or my application without necessarily having to do that whole work by myself. And that's what fetching remote data is. Now, of course, because JavaScript can accept cookies or can access cookies, it can really do everything that a cookie allows us to do because cookies allows us to be able to access the file system. And if you're able to create the file system, we can upload files, we can create documents, we can even modify files if we need to. So that is very, very powerful. So using cookies, JavaScript can be able to help us or it can be used to manipulate the file system. So number five, can manipulate the file system. The file system is your Windows system or your Mac system or whichever system you're using, whether it's Ubuntu. So it can be used to manipulate your file system. Or since it can access your file system, you can create directories, you can delete directories, you can create files, you can rename files, and any other activity that you want to do within the file system. So you can see this is actually quite a lot of things that this particular programming language can do, and that's why we want to learn it. Now, JavaScript has versions. So I come here and mentions versions of JS. So the first version of JS came out in 1995. That was JavaScript 1. So 1995 was JavaScript version 1 or JS 1. That's when JavaScript first came into existence. Then in the year 2001 or 2002, thereabout, I'm not really sure about the date, we introduced JavaScript version 2. So that was in 2001. Then, of course, in 2009, we introduced JavaScript version 3. Now, from 2009 to 2015, we introduced now these versions of JavaScript from version 1 to version 3 are legacy versions. Okay, they're legacy versions of JavaScript, and actually, it's called ECMAScript. JavaScript is called ECMAScript. This is the official name, ECMAScript. So this is the official name for JavaScript, ECMAScript. So this there was ECMAScript 1, 2, 3. Now in 2015, that's when JavaScript started changing really in a really big way. So in 2015, we introduced what we call JavaScript ES6. ES6 is the modern version of JavaScript 2015, not 2025, 2015. ES6 is the modern version of JavaScript. This is what you're using to date. So from 2015, we had ES6. Then from 2016 we to current date, we've been having, so 2016, we had ES6, then they call it ES6 2016. And they continue naming it like this up to the current date. So if you look at the most recent version of JavaScript, you'll find that it is JavaScript ES6 2025. That is the current version of JavaScript that we're using. So previously we just used to call it JavaScript 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but from 2015 we started calling it JavaScript ES. So ES6, now we put the ES. So 6 is the most current version of JavaScript. This one was ES5. This JavaScript 3 was ES5. So there are some versions in between that they was keeping, of course, depending on the major upgrades that they're doing. Because I mean, JavaScript was still a very young programming language up to 2009. Of course, with the popularity that the Ryan Dahl gave it with Node.js, then it became so popular. So we introduced ES6 with new features, and every other time they publish new standards for browsers to be able to execute. Now, when we talk about publishing standards, what it means is that we have a body called World Wide Web Consortium, WW3C or W3C. So World Wide Web Consortium, and this is the body that publishes the standards that are going to be used on the internet. And one of the standards is JavaScript. So they only give specifications on how each and every browser should execute JavaScript. Now, how the browser does it, that is the business. EW3 only does what we call publishing the standards. So whenever you go and you see standards for JavaScript, so maybe just let me open a browser here and say W the wild WWC3 W3C. Yes, World Wide Web Consortium, this one. So if you look at the standards that they publish for JavaScript, so you see the web standards are actually here, and they will specify how these standards are going to work for each and every uh, language, whether it's HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, and specifically those three. Okay, so that's very important. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that JavaScript has what we call built-in APIs. So it has inbuilt APIs, and these APIs allow us to do several things. So it has inbuilt APIs. And these APIs range from location, so I can be able to tell where you are from the browser if location is enabled. I can do the fetch API, which you saw allows us to be able to get remote data. We also have the storage API, which allows us to be able to store data inside our browser with SQLite or web storage or whatever standard it is that you want to store data, and so forth and so forth. It can also has the telephone API, which can allow you to make telephones directly from your web application, amongst many other things. So these built-in APIs are also part of the things that make JavaScript a very, very powerful programming language. So we've looked at what JavaScript is. We have seen what it can do. We've also looked at the versions of JavaScript. Now, how do we really use JavaScript inside our application? So there are three ways you can use JavaScript within your applications. So let me say using JS? Well, there are three ways, but basically there are just two ways. So the first method that you can use JavaScript. So this is using JavaScript. So the first way or the first method to use JavaScript is embedding the script. And this is not the best way to use JavaScript, but it's allowed. So what happens is after my body, I can create a script tag here. Then inside that script tag, I'll write my JavaScript. Let me say I want to add two numbers and get the results. So I'll do something like this. Function, add, function, add two numbers. I'll give the numbers as A and B. Then what I will do is I will just return A plus B. Don't worry about what I've written here. We're going to learn all about this. I'm just giving us an example of how you can write JavaScript. So that is one way you can. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too complex. Let me just leave that. Let's just say I want to put something inside my page here, and I say "Hello World" JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go live here so that this page goes live so that we can see the input and output side by side. I'll come to Visual Studio Code here, come to my code, and then I'll run them side by side like that. So I have Visual Studio Code on the left, then I have my browser on the right. So if I wanted to output some text here, which is what we're going to do next anyway, I can simply say here, document dot write hello world from JavaScript. So if I do that, you can see automatically I output the words hello world from JavaScript. So this is going to execute. This is going to execute after the browser has loaded. So it will check if there are any scripts to be executed, then it will execute whatever scripts you have put inside the script tab. So this is the first method, or this is the first method that you can use to introduce JavaScript into your web pages. Okay, just a second. Sorry about that. So as I was mentioning, there are two ways you can use JavaScript. You can embed it with a script like this, or the best way to do it is you can use an external file. So you can also use an external file. So you can use an external file. So using an external file, what will happen is you'll come to your file explorer over here. Maybe I'll come inside this JavaScript folder. Then I'll create a new file, call it intro to js.js. So the file has to have the .js extension. So this is intro to JS, not intro to js.js. Then from here, from this file, now I can write my function. So I can come here and simply say uh, document dot write actually document dot write document dot write, and I'll simply say welcome to JS from external file, something like that. Now, that won't work directly because as you can see, if I was to remove this script tag that I've put here, nothing shows on my browser window. So what will happen is I will need to introduce that file. So I'll still use the script tag, but now I will use a property or an attribute called source src. Then I will point to my maybe say JavaScript folder. Then inside the JavaScript folder, I'll pick intro to JS like that. Then of course I have to close my script. Now if I do that, you'll see now it takes whatever is inside this file and executes it. And the only thing you've told it that whatever is in this file is basically just right on the browser, welcome to JS from external file, which is what it has done over here. So those are the two ways that you can use JavaScript for now. This is the best way to do it. Now, this is good because whenever I have errors, I'll show you how this works out. Let's say we have heading one here, and I'll say welcome to JS. Okay, which is actually there. Then what I can do here, I can introduce a script here, and inside this script, I can simply say document dot write. This is a sample text, for example. Now that sample text is going to appear here. Then maybe I can give it with a break so that it introduces a new line like that. So now what happens if I make a mistake here? If I make a mistake there, that portion of JavaScript is going to have issues. Now, when I try to come to inspect here, and I come to my console here, you'll see it tells me that document is not defined. And this is fine. This can be found inside intro.html line number 71. Now, column number 5. So if you come to this file, where's line number 71? You can see there's no line number 71. And that is the problem of doing this thing this way. Because a lot of things can happen inside the browser. So if you do spaghetti code, this is what we're calling spaghetti code. If you do this spaghetti code kind of a thing, it will always be giving you errors where actually it does not even exist. So you can see now it's telling me it's on line number 71 simply because some other things also introduce other things inside the browser, and basically that is now the other problem. So that can sometimes make it very difficult for you to debug the application. So I prefer to use the external one because if I'm using the external one, like this, and I just make a mistake on the external file, like that, and it generates an error, of course. Then when I come to inspect and I come to console, I'll see intro.js line number 1. So it's telling me upfront the error is on line number 1, column number 1, which is here. So I can easily be able to debug that. So besides the so that's one of the advantages of using script like that. And the other thing is that I can take this script and use it in multiple pages. So, for example, I have functions that do things like create files, things like validate data, things like fetch data remotely, things like replacing content in portions of a page. Maybe they are running some certain animations and so forth and so forth. These are things that I might want to use over and over again. So when I write them inside an external file, it makes it very easier for me to be able to export them in data files and reuse them over and over again, as opposed to writing them like this, where I have to copy and paste. In the event that I need to make a change, I'll have to go through all the pages and make those changes. Otherwise, if it was just in this particular file, I'll come to that file, make the correction, and everything fixes up itself. So that's why the second method of using JavaScript is very important. All right. Any question up to that point? Okay. So now the other thing is, how do we output JavaScript? How do we output JavaScript? So we have seen one method of outputting JavaScript, which is actually document.write. So outputting JavaScript. So there are four ways you can output JavaScript. One of them is writing it on the document on the body, and that is using what we call document.write, which is what you've seen. So you do document.write, then D is lowercase, then what output. That's very important. So when you say document.write, it means you want to output something on the browser window, right? So that is one way that you can output JavaScript, and as you can see, that is what you've used for both here and actually even here. All right. So that is document.write. Now the other one, which is the most favorable one, is using the console.log. So to output some JavaScript content, and because this output could be debugging or things like that, we can use the console, the debugging tool, then we log. Then we can log the text. So let me give you a very classic example. Let me say, for example, I'll just close this one because we don't need to use this one. And most of the time, I'm going to write my JavaScript inside here. Okay, so I'll comment that. So if I wanted to, if I say something like I'm declaring a variable, say a variable called by, and I give it a value of 3.142, then I want to output the value of pi. So I want to maybe say do the area of a circle. So maybe I can say declare another constant called radius or r and give it maybe say 10 centimeters or maybe say 7 centimeters. Then now you declare another variable called circumference. Circumference is 2 pi r or pi d. So circumference is 2 times pi times radius times 2 because it's 2 pi d, right? Then if I wanted to see what the value of the circumference is, I can either do whatever we had looked at, which is document.write, and I'll simply say C. So that should output for me 87.879. So that's one of the ways that you can output. But of course, when you're debugging, we don't write on the browser window. What we do is we use inspect, and then from inspect, we come to the console over here. Now, this console will be able to give us a place where we can be able to output our JavaScript for purposes of testing. So instead of doing document.write, I'll simply say console.log. Then I will log my C. So you'll be able to see that my value actually comes outside the console. And 99% of the time, this is how you're going to be doing our debugging. So if you don't do document.write, then you can do console.c. Now, the other thing that you can do besides console.log, the third method you can output JavaScript is using what we call an alert box. So we can also use alert function to output the values. So how do you use an alert function? An alert is basically a function that pops up on your window, something like a message box or something of the sort. So here again, besides using console, we can still use alert, and you can say something like this: alert. Then you say see whatever we want to alert. So you're going to see a message appears here with the value 87.8976. And even if I was to output this value and say now this radius is now 35, you still able to see it's giving me now 439.88. So alert is another way that you can be able to output your JavaScript. Now, the other way, the last method that you can use to output JavaScript is using inner HTML. So, inner HTML. So, just mix that up like that. So, in HTML, what it will mean is that I'll come inside my HTML and probably create something like a division here and with an ID. So, I thought I had, well, I need to mask this so that it doesn't keep on showing up. So, what can happen here, I can have a div which says results. Okay, so inside these results, I might want to output the results inside here. Okay, so I want to output the results inside here, and this is where now I was saying JavaScript allows you to be able to change only a portion of the page. So I want to change whatever is inside here. So you can see here I can put results, and I'll put here 0. So by default, the result is going to be 0. But I want that when once I've done my calculation, I want to come and replace this result over here. So I can come here and now use what we call inner HTML. So the first thing I'll do, I'll declare a variable called maybe say results. Then of course you're going to see how we can use uh, query selectors. So I can actually get element by ID. Then I can call it results. We're going to learn all about how to fetch DOM elements, but for now, I want to show you how to use um, the inner HTML to see how this works out. So the results is here. So I've picked an element with an ID of results, as you can see. So that I'm storing this variable. So once I'm done calculating this, I'll simply say results location dot inner HTML is equals to now my C. So what will happen here, you'll see now my result has replaced whatever was there. So initially, if I didn't execute this statement, you'll be able to see that the result was 0. Now, when I execute this statement, it only changes a portion of that page and it is only refreshing that portion. Now, I want to show you that actually it replaces that portion. What I will do is I will put a button here. So I'll put a button here with an ID of calculate or show results. Okay. So this show results, I'll simply say show results so that you can be able to appreciate how that works out. So when I click on this show results, it's when it's supposed to do the calculation. So initially, it's not going to do the calculation. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say results button equals document dot get element by ID. I don't know what ID I gave it, but it should be something like show results. Just the ID I gave
Excuse
it.
me.
Yes.
Been told like there are some students trying to join the class and they aren't able to join. They're
Yeah.
requesting for the permission to join.
Okay. Though that's what I was trying to avoid, but for the interest of everyone, it's okay. I hope now everything is cool. So as I
Yeah,
was
it's okay.
mentioning, the results button, I've put it as a result button like that. So I'll only want to change this portion when somebody clicks on this button. So by default, this is not going to show, or I can just cut it. I can just cut it, and I will say I'll add an event listener to this results button. So I'll say this results button dot add an event listener, and this event is going to be clicked. Again, we're going to learn about all these much later on. I'm only using it for purpose of showing us what will happen. This one has a callback function. We're going to learn about functions next. So you'll see what they happen. So this is an example of a callback function. Then I'll just execute this statement. Now, what will happen is nothing will happen when this page loads. If I reload this page 100 times, it's going to remain the same. But I want you to observe this. So I'll come to elements here. And I want you to observe this portion here. I want you to observe this portion, the portion that I've highlighted. Okay? When I click on results, you can see that it fades out and then the value changes. Observe that. So it picks an element with an idea of results and changes its content. So what happens is when I click on save, when I click on that, let me just do that again. When I click on this save, you can see it only changes that particular portion. And that is the power of JavaScript. I don't need to replace my entire page just to show other logic. So I can be able to output that value nicely. So I could simply come here instead of saying C, I'll put a template string and say the circumference of circle with radius is equals to, then I can put my radius, which is R there, is equals to, then now I can put my C. So you see, this is a template string. Don't worry about it. I'm just trying to take some string literals, then concatenate them with some variables. We're going to see what variables are and all that. So what I'm going to do here is when I click on that, you can see it says the circumference of a circle with radius of 35 is 439.88. So you can see it is picking the radius, it is picking the circumference, and then it outputs the other static text that I have over there. So this is really now how JavaScript works. So again, what was important is for us to be able to see how you can embed JavaScript inside your document, and how you embed it is in two ways. One, you can use an inbuilt script, an embedded script like this, or you can use an external file as I'm using it here. But when it comes to outputting JavaScript, we can use document.write, we can use console.log, we can use an alert, or we can also use inner HTML if we want to change a portion of the page, which is essentially what we'll be doing most of the time when we are dealing with JavaScript. Mpaka hapo tuko sawa? Boniface, are you paying attention or you just logged in and left? So clearly Boniface came to mark attendance, eh? You're here. Ronnie says together. Okay, so perfect. So at least we okay, Boniface, thank you. At least we are somewhere. We know what JavaScript is, and we know how to embed it on our page, and we know how to output it, right? Up to there to Kosawa. Sindio, we can start looking at other things. Okay. So now just like any other programming language, JavaScript allows us to use what we call variables. So I'm going to discuss variables in JavaScript, and variables are big because they enable us to store values that we are working with so that we don't have to repeat things over and over again. Let me give you a classic example. Suppose I wanted to display my name. So I could simply come here and say something like document.write hello Richard, which is my name. Welcome to JS. It will output hello Richard, welcome to JS. So probably maybe I can put a break here like that. So it will put hello Richard, welcome to JS. What if I wanted to change this name to something else? It means that every time I want to change the name, I have to come here and say now I want to talk about John. And next time I'm dealing with Mary, I have to come and put Mary, and so forth and so forth. So this is not very scalable. This is not very scalable because it means that we have to come and change our code every other time. And that's where variables come into play. So what are variables? So variables. Variables by definition are what we refer to as placeholders reserved in memory for holding working values. So at some point you have to store some variables by reserving some memory location. Remember, a computer is designed is you have looked you I believe you have looked at the von Neumann architecture. The computer is made up of um, input, process, and output. The process is further divided into memory, control unit, and what else? Wherever it is. I'm interested in memory only, right? When it comes to processing, the computer has memory, and memory is where we load data that you're working with. Okay. Now, this place where we load data that we're working with, the data that we're working with is what we're actually referring to as variables. So placeholders that we reserve in memory for holding the values that we are working with. Okay, so those are variables. Now, so to use a variable, what I could do here is I can come and say variable name is equals to Richard, right? Then here I can simply come and say um, the variable name and nothing will change. So you can still see this should be plus, not dots. That's the problem of using too many programming languages. So now you can see it says Richard, and I can put hello here. So it can say hello, name, welcome to JS. So hello Richard, welcome to JS. So if the name was to change to Jack and maybe even Paul or Tom, or let me say even Elizabeth, as you can see, now I don't need to change what the output is going to be. I only need to change the variable itself. So previously I was using what you call a string literal. Now I'm using a name. So name is a reserved word in JavaScript. That's why it's complaining. So I just put fname here, and that should be able to fix it like that. So you can still see it's able to work nicely. So that is what a variable is. All right, that is what variables are. Now that you know what variables are, how do we define variables in JavaScript? Now, JavaScript has three ways. So let's me come back here and talk about JS variable declaration. Now, why would somebody want to come to class after an hour and 10 minutes? I wonder. So I'll ignore them. They can follow up in the video. Make sure I'll send you the invitation for the class right after this. Go into your email, accept the invitation so that you come to the class silently. Whenever there's the class, click on the link, you will join the class silently whether I'm there or not. So I don't need to admit you. So that's the beauty. And that's why I was saying I need you to fill in that form. I'm seeing we have 46 responses, which is good enough. So at least 46 of you will receive an email inviting you to attend the class, and you should be able to do that. Okay, so I was discussing how do we declare variable in JavaScript. Now, there are three ways you can declare variables in JavaScript. Method number one to declare variables is using the var keyword. Using the var keyword. Now, be as it may, this is the worst idea that you want to conceive at this day and age. And I'll explain why that happens. Now, when you're using var, and we have used it here already, so I can remove everything here, and I simply say something like var my name, like that. Then I can simply say here, I'll use the console because that's what we're going to be using mostly. So I'll use the console here, and I can come here and I can say console.log my name. So it's going to output that name on the browser. So you can see it's undefined, which is a good thing. We're going to define data types in JavaScript in maybe today, maybe in our next class, but that's not a big deal. So undefined is actually a type of data, which means that we have declared a variable, but we have not assigned a value to it. So we have declared a variable called my var, but we have not assigned a value to it. But if we had come here and say my name is equals to Richard, then it will put here Richard, which is good. But at the same time, I can declare a variable and initialize it all within one statement like that. That will still allow me to access Richard because I declared the variable and I initialize it to a value. So usually, when you're talking about variables, it will depend on what really is your interest. Do you want to define the variable first, or do you want to define the variable and initialize it, or do you want to define a variable then reassign its value much later? So the option that I made here that my name is equals to Richard, this is reassignment. This second statement here is reassignment. So this one, as it were, like that, that was a variable that I've just defined it. Then here I reassign the value. But if I put an equal sign here, then it means that I initialize it. I declare it as I initialize it. So again, when you're working with variables, it will depend on how you want to treat them. I prefer declaration and initialization to a default value first. All right. So that's how I kind of like see it working. Now, when it comes to var data types, when it comes to declaring variables using, when it comes to variable declaration using var, several things happen. They are good and they are bad at the same time. So when it comes to var, the first thing or the properties it has is that Number one, it can be hoisted. Now, hoisted means that you can be able to use that variable before you actually define it. You can do something as crazy as this. I can console.log, first of all, my name, then I declare it, then once I declare it, I log it again. I want you to observe what happens. So first of all, I'm calling this variable without defining it. And as you can see, it becomes undefined. Then I define it and initialize it, then I call it again. So it means now it has a value. So the first one means that even if I don't have this last console.log, it means that I can access this variable way before I declare it. That's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It all depends on how you look at it, because this is a source of logical errors as far as your program is concerned. Errors in logic are, for example, I want to declare a constant like VAT rate. I don't declare it. Then I try to compute VAT. Then I get some very crazy values before I assign it a value. So you can see it becomes a bit crazy in that kind of a manner, right? So when you're talking about var keyword, the variable can be hoisted, which means it can be used before it is declared. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It all depends on how you're looking at it. The other advantage, the other property of using var is that variable can be redeclared. Re- Redeclared means I can define this variable, then I can go ahead and redefine it again. So what I mean is this. You can see here I've defined variable, my name is Richard. Then I can come here still and say variable, my name. Then I say my name is equals to John. Maybe I meant this one was first name, this one was last name, but you can see I have actually been able to redeclare it. So when I redeclare it, let me just remove this so that you see what happens. When I redeclare it, now you can see initially it says var, my name is Richard, then I redeclared it as my name again, then I output. So you can see it was just redeclared, but it still maintains the value Richard. So initially it was undefined, then it became written. So this is variable redeclaration. Okay. Now the other property about var is that variable can be reassigned. Reassigned means you can change its value. So when you're talking about the let keyword, a variable can be reassigned, which means its value can be changed. What it means is that when I declare this variable here, then I can come back here and say, my name is John Paul. Then when I output my name, now it's not going to show Richard, it's going to show John Paul. Because when I initialize it to Richard, then I reassign it to John Paul, it means that now the variable is going to hold John Paul at that particular point, which is actually what we are outputting. So these are four key properties to using var. It can be a good thing, it can be a terrible nightmare for you when it comes to logical errors in your program. It all depends on how you are looking at it. All right. So that's method number one that you can use to declare variables in JavaScript using the var keyword, as I've shown us in these examples. Now, the other way you can define variables in JavaScript is using the let keyword. Now, this is an older way. This is the older way of doing things before 2015. That is how we were declaring variables. So you can imagine all the problems that they had. You have to be a bit careful with your program, especially when you're dealing with a lot of variables that keep on exchanging back and forth. So that's very, very key for us. So before 2015, before year six, mostly we're using var as a keyword to define all our variables, and they could be hoisted, they could be declared, they could be reassigned. And of course, at the same time, they have what we call a global scope. I forgot that. They have a global scope, which means they're accessible anywhere. So here is they have a global scope, which means the variable is accessible from anywhere inside the application. It doesn't matter where you declared it. That's a bad thing, right? Trust me, that's a bad thing. Once you start using function, you will see why that is a very, very bad idea. So the second method of defining declaring variables in JavaScript is using the let keyword. So in 2015, the W3C, or the World Web Consortium, came up with a standard where we can now declare variables using the let keyword. And of course, this one was much better because it took care of the problems that var had. By the way, you should only use var if you're targeting very old systems. But if you're targeting newer systems, please don't use var. It might be a bit of a problem when it comes to managing your variables or logical errors. So use the let keyword. Now, using the let keyword, one thing is for sure is that it does not support hoisting. So what it means here is that variables cannot be hoisted. Okay, so variables cannot be hoisted. What does that mean? That means that you cannot use a variable before you declare it. So let me give you an example. So we have been using var here, and you can actually use the variable before you declare it. So let's use let and see how that works out. So I'll say something like console.log, then I'll put maybe say my name, right? Now, if I did that, you can see here it's saying my name is not defined. So it means that there is no way on earth I'm going to use that variable before I declare it. Now, if I came down here and I said, okay, let me declare my variable, let my name is equals to Richard like that. Okay? So what it means is that still that will not be able to work because let does not hoist. Let does not allow us to hoist variables. So which means that I cannot use that variable before I declare it. So I cannot call this variable before I declare it. Now I have to declare it first, then I use it like that. Now that is going to work out. So you can see now that gives me Richard. So I can't access Richard before I actually declare it and assign it. Okay, I can actually access it. I can access it without assigning it a value, so long as I access it, so long as I define it. So long as it is defined, I don't need to assign a value to it. I just need it to be defined as a variable. Then that way it is now accessible. That is independent of what data is holding. What's important is that it must be declared before it is used. Are you together at that point? These things are going to be very important when we are writing our application. Okay, so that is one thing that let help us in solving. We cannot hoist variables, which means we have to declare variables before we use them. Now, the other thing that let solved was what we call variable declaration. So variable cannot be declared. If you're using let, you cannot declare a variable. So redeclaring would mean you override a variable or you introduce other things to it, so you introduce bugs in your program. So since we are using let, it means that you cannot re-declare our variable. So what I can't do here is I can't come here and I say let my name is equals to Richard. Or let my name again, then I say my name is equals to Richard. It's not going to accept that. What it's going to tell you is that my name has already been declared. So you cannot redeclare it. Remember, if I was using var, var would actually allow me to redeclare this. You can see there's no error and it works, right? But if I'm trying to use let, that is, it's not going to have none of that. Once I've let it like that, it's not going to have it redeclared again. So I can't either let or var it. It has to be declared only once. Okay? So you cannot redeclare a variable, which is a good thing. You keep your variables intact. The other thing about Another thing about the other thing about using let is that you can reassign. So uh, can variable can be reassigned, which means you can change the value that that variable is holding assigned, which means you can be able to change the value that the variable is actually holding. And I think I have actually achieved that here. So when I say let my name, then my name is Richard, I'm actually reassigning the value in my name to be Richard. So if I had initialized here to be John, then you can see it's going to output Richard because once it reaches this point, I have reassigned the value of that particular variable. Okay. Now, the other advantage with let keyword is variables are scoped, and this is very important. So variables are scoped. So they belong to a certain scope. They are not accessible globally, like in Let, where you will just access it from wherever you are in your application. Because it allows hoisting, it assumes that you're going to declare it sometimes in the future, and you can use it even without declaring it. So with Let, variable has a scope. So let me give you the scope that I'm talking about. Let me say I have a function here that says get my name, and it does not accept any variables. Then I let another my name here, and I say this is Richard inside scope. Okay, so if I call get my name as a function like that, probably you're not going to see anything. So you can see it works. Only that, well, what I would have done here is I could have console.log, console.log my name. So if I do that, I see Richard inside scope and I see the other Richard that is outside. So if I come down here, if I move this console.log down here, you can see I still have Richard inside the scope, which is this, my name. Then this my name refers to this other Richard also. So this my name and this my name, in as much as the names are the same, the scope of this my name is only inside this function. The scope of this my name is outside the function. Now, I want you to observe if I put let, if I put var. So if I put var, you can see. So it means that then this my name and this my name, if I did not declare it here, and I declared it here as var, so you can still see it's able to access all of them regardless of whether this has been defined. So hoisting is a very big problem for us when it comes to variable creation. So again, when it comes to using let, the variable is actually scoped, which means it's only accessible within the scope that it was declared. Okay. Now, the third way of declaring variables in JavaScript, the third way of declaring variables in JavaScript is using the const keyword. So const, just like let, will not allow you to hoist variables. So hoisting is not allowed. Uh, does not allow hoisting, which means you must declare that variable before you actually use it. We're going to see that in a short while. Again, the variable cannot be redeclared. So in as much as not allowing it to be hoisted, you cannot also redeclare a variable. Cannot redeclare a variable. Now the difference between const and let is that the variable cannot be reassigned. So you cannot change the value of the variable. Now, there are certain scenarios where we don't want that. For example, when you're declaring things like constant, maybe the value of pi. The value of pi will always be 3.142, right? When you're declaring things like the value of tax rate, it could be something like 16% or something of the sort. So it doesn't keep on changing every other time. So in scenarios where you don't need that variable to be changing, you can declare it as a using the const keyword. And of course, the variables are scoped. So variables are scoped, which means that unlike var, they're only scoped within the limits that they are supposed to be used. So if you want them to be globally accessible, you declare them outside globally. Otherwise, if you want them to only apply within a scope, then you can always declare them inside that particular scope. Okay? So let's see how const works. So I can have here const pi, then I can say when I declare a const, I have to give it a value. So I can't say pi, then I give pi is 3.142. This one is reassignment, and reassignment is not allowed. Okay, so pi, I'll declare it and assign it at exactly the same time, 142, and this is not allowed. As you can see, assignment to a constant variable. So I'm trying to assign it. That is not allowed. So I cannot also declare here. I cannot really declare pi. So you can see here, pi has already been identified. So again, I cannot re-identify it. Of course, if I was to define pi, then I have another function here that says compute area of a circle. Then I simply say pi here is 3.142. You can see it's not complaining anymore because this pi and this pi belong to completely different scopes. This one is accessible globally. This one is only accessible within this function where it has been declared into. Okay, so that's very, very important for us to be able to understand the three levels or the three methods we can use to define variables in JavaScript using var, using let, and using const. And what is the difference between all of them? You need to be able to be clear on all of that. Okay, if you get that right, you are not going to have a lot of logical errors when you're writing your programs. If you are careless with that, then you better be prepared to be dealing with quite some bit of logical errors, errors in logic as far as your application is concerned. Any question up to that point? Any question up to that point? I'll take a question or two if there's any. I can you can use the chat. Oscar is asking. Oscar is saying we are together, but I'm too fast. That's why we are recording this. Eh? Okay. I'll try to be a little bit slow. It's just that we have a lot of things to cover, but I'll try to be a little bit slow. Now, Oscar is also asking, do we have variable types in JavaScript? Of course we have, but that's what we want to discuss next. Okay. So, right. So if there's no question, I think let's just go next to what we call data types in JavaScript. Data types in JavaScript. So just like any other programming language, JavaScript has data type. So what's a data type? Data type is the format that is used to store data. Format used to store data, or shape used to store data. So the shape that you use to store that data is referred to as data type or the format. Now in JavaScript we have two main categories of data types. So data types in JavaScript are classified into two. So classification of data types or types in JS. We have what we call primitive types. So one is primitive types, which are seven in nature. Then we also have object types, which are two in nature. So we have two object types, which are two in nature. We're going to discuss them. They're basically, yeah, we're going to discuss them in later on. So let's talk about the primitive types for this particular class. Now we have seven primitive types in JavaScript. I'm only going to focus on five because that's what we use the most anyway. So we have five primitive types. We have seven primitive types in JavaScript, but I'm only going to focus on five. So the first type, I'll use hyphen like that, is what we call number. So JavaScript allows you to be able to store numbers as primitive types. Primitive means they can only hold one value at a time. So basic, primitive or basic. So primitive slash basic. They can only hold one value at a time. Unlike the other ones, which can hold more than one value at a time. So numbers can be stored in two ways. We have what we call integers, and we also have what we call double or real numbers. So the difference between an integer and a real number is that integers are whole numbers only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the likes. Real, on the other hand, is a number with decimal places 10.5, 16.236, and so forth and so forth. So number will take care of those two. Okay, so let's see how that works out. So I can come, well, I can mask this. I can come now, depending, it will depend on how you want to declare a variable, whether you want to use let, const, or var. That's not really important for now, so long as you pick any of them. Mostly, if I'm dealing with a constant like pi, I'll simply say pi is equals to, sorry, 3.142, something like that. So this is a number. Then I can declare another variable called radius or age. And age is something like 34 years. It's not like 34 and a half years, right? So all these are actually numbers. And if you wanted to confirm what type they are, so I can simply say here console.log, then I say type of, maybe say pi. It should tell me pi is actually undefined. No, it should be pi, not PIE. Pi is actually a number, as you can see here. Then if I console.log age, then I say type of age, you should be able to see that all of them are actually numbers. In as much as this is 3.14 and this is 34. Actually, you can say 34 million, something like that. All of them are just numbers, right? So that's one of the data types that we use in JavaScript as a primitive type number. It will take either integers or real numbers. Okay, so the difference between integer and real numbers I've explained. Integer is whole numbers only, real is numbers with decimal places. Okay. Now other people can go ahead and give you things like double and float, etc. So what it means is that this is just about precision. So double, float, single, integer, and all that, they're all about precision. Double and float is a very large number with very many decimal places. Double, on the other hand, is something like up to 15 trillion, something of the sort. So it will depend on what kind of variable you're storing. Of course, if I'm talking about somebody's age, I cannot store somebody's age as a double. Can I have somebody who's more than 15 trillion years old? I can't. Most of the time, I'll be dealing with 100 years or less when I'm talking about somebody's age. But if I'm talking about all the sand particles on Earth, then that is a float. It is a number way, way bigger than a double. So it's float. So again, when you see something like float and double and int and all that, basically it's all about the precision of the number. How big a number do you want to store as far as your variable is concerned? So the second type of primitive type in JavaScript is what we call string. Sorry, why is it not putting a comment? So the second one is string. So string are chains of, of alphanumeric character, chain of alphanumeric characters. Things like names of places, names of people. So these are referred to as string. And the good thing is that string can be as long as possible. So Nairobi is a string, my name Richard is a string, bag is a string, took is a string. So definitely anything that is a noun is definitely a string. Okay? So that's also another primitive type of data that we have in JavaScript. Now, for you to define strings, I can say here maybe something like const. Well, first name can change, so let me let f name is equals to Richard. So you can see that's an example of first name. I can have address, and address could be PO Box 52428 00200. Sorry, 00200 Nairobi. Now, I have used two types of uh, what do we call them? Closest. This one's here. So I've used a quotes. So I've used a double quote and I've used a single quote. So whenever you're defining a string in JavaScript, you can use either. You can either use a double quote or a single quote. Either will still be able to work. So again, we can check those types of data. So we can say console.log type of. I can simply say fname, and you can see that gives me a string. Okay. Similarly, if I did address, it will give me a string also. So the thing that's important is you should know, so you can see all of them are string. I can either use a single quote or double quote. But if I start with a double quote, I must end with a double quote. If I start with a single quote, I must end with a single quote. So you can't mix and match them. If you pick one, well, for different variable names, you can mix and match, but for one variable name, you have to use the exact one. If you start with a double quote, end with a double quote. If you start with a single quote, end with a single quote. So that's the second category of primitive type that we have in JavaScript. Now, the third category of primitive type that we have in JavaScript is called Boolean. So the third type is Boolean. Sorry. So we have Boolean. Boolean is where we're talking about true or false, one or zero. So when we're talking about Boolean, we also want to say that this is either true or false. Okay. So again, so true or false values. Or in short, they handle parity values. Parity means two, eh? So you're either true or you're false. Nothing in between. So you can just decide on one. So let's see how you can use Boolean inside JavaScript. So I can simply add something like const married, and it could be false. Okay, or I could simply say plays chess. I can say this is true, something of the sort. Okay, again, if I was to output this using console.log, then I simply say married. Probably see it gives you that's a Boolean type. Okay, so the third category besides number, um, string, now we have boolean. Then we have two that are a bit special. So there, of course, I know we have another two which I'm not going to discuss because I've never seen a practical application of them. For purposes of your reading or expanding your knowledge, you can go ahead and read about them if you're interested. But I feel like I've never encountered a situation in my programming life where I use those two. So I'll only show you the ones that I've felt or I've used in real life and what they actually do. Remember, you must not use everything that a programming language actually offers. You just might want to use whatever is practical for your case. Okay? So let's talk about the other category of data types we have in JS as far as primitive types are concerned. We have what we call undefined values. Undefined. Undefined. So undefined means that variable was declared but no value was assigned to it. So you can declare a variable, and if you don't define a variable, you define a value for it, then it becomes undefined, which means it's just a variable with nothing. Okay, so let's see. So I can come here, I can maybe say declare interest, not declare but const interest. Now const won't allow me, let me say let interested in. Now I've just declared interested in. So if I console.logged type of interested in, you'll see it gives me undefined, which means I have declared it, but I have never assigned any value to it. So the value that is currently holding is undefined. And this is important because I can now do form validation and check which variable is this variable undefined, which means did I declare it and I never assigned a variable to it, something of the sort. Then I can be able to handle that error gracefully at that particular point when I'm doing my form validation. Remember, one of the functionalities of JavaScript is to allow us to do form validation. So that's how undefined works. Now, lastly, we have what we call null. Null is not undefined. Null is an actual value, right? Which is nothing, right? Undefined is we never give it any value. So it has not been assigned any value. Null is a value which means nothing. Hakuna kitu, zilch. However, you would prefer to call it. So again, I can define here, maybe say score equals to null. Then I can do here type of score. So now is, well, they are talking about null here as an object. So you can see, well, whereas it is actually nothing, then I don't know why it's picking it as an object, but null should actually be zilch, nothing, blank. Okay? Because when I say something to null, it means that it's not holding any value at all. It is blank. It's like vacuum, so to speak. Okay? So that's the difference between um the different types of data types that you have in JavaScript. You have number, you have string, you have boolean, undefined, and null. So wherever you're working with variables, just make sure that if they are going to be primitive types, they're going to focus only on those five. No other. Well, I mean, there are other two, like pointer and all that, which I'm not going to get into for now because I've never seen a snare application for them, but these are the most important ones. Okay? I know that's a mouthful in terms of what we have looked at. We have seen what JavaScript is. We have looked at the various versions of JavaScript. We have seen what it can do or where we can use it for. We have seen how to integrate it inside our pages. Either you embed it or use an external file. We have also seen how to output JavaScript, the four methods that you can use to output it, either using the console or document.write or in HTML or even alert. Then you have gone ahead and defined what variables are and specified how we can define variables differently, whether we can use var or const or let, and you have clearly defined what those three different levels of declarations mean. Then I think we've gone ahead and looked at now what how the types of data that we can be able to store as far as JavaScript is concerned. So we have number, we have string, we have boolean, we have undefined, and we have now null, which is actually an actual value. And somebody, where does date fall? Isn't date primitive type? In most programming languages, yes, date is supposed to be a primitive type. In JavaScript, on the other hand, date is an object. And we're going to see how to handle date much later on so that we understand where now the object part of the date actually comes in. Okay? So that's a mouthful, and I want you to be able to understand that. So when you come next time, we're going to discuss the other category of data types, which in this particular case are objects. And objects are special. They are on their own league, which actually makes using JavaScript a very powerful tool. So we're going to discuss it in our next lesson in a much greater detail, so that it has an entire class of 2 hours of its own. Okay. So I think I'll give you this opportunity to ask for any questions, or you can give any comments that are necessary. Now, there are three ways you can answer a question. Number one, you can unmute your mic, then ask the question. Number two, you can type in the chat. Or number three, you can raise your hand. So either of those methods is applicable. Just go ahead and ask, then I'll respond to them before we close this. Somebody is trying to come to class at the end of it. I have absolutely no idea why you would do that. So I think I'll just ignore them for now. So Oscar is having, can you have a variable that holds different sizes of numbers? For example, radius of an atom or radius of the earth as the same variable. The issue here is precision. So I've said if you're talking about integer has a precision of about, I think it is a billion in JavaScript. If you're talking about double, it does something like a quintillion. A quintillion is the number that follows a trillion. Okay. Then if I'm talking about a float, I'm talking about something like a Google. A Google is the number one to the power of 100. Maybe say somebody wants to calculate all the solar particles on Earth. So you see, all of them are just numbers. The only difference is going to be the precision that you want to look at. So if you're looking at the radius of Earth, it's big compared to, of course, the radius of an atom, which is in nanometers. So it's going to be a very small fraction in terms of the precision. So yes, you can use number for all of them. The only difference between the two is that the precision that you're going to use. If you want to hold a very large number, use a float. Float is the largest that you can have. If you want medium, use double. If you want medium, use integer. Okay. I hope Oscar have answered that. George is asking, okay, how about the notes? You're fast and the notes can help. You want? I have recorded the video so you can play it at half the speed if you want to. YouTube will allow you to play at half the speed, or any music player that you're going to use, or any video player that you're going to use can allow you to play it at half the speed, 0.75, one times. And if I'm too slow, you can even do it 1.5 or even twice as fast. Okay? So George, yeah, I can make the notes available, but of course, as I had been typing, you have been able to see exactly what I was doing. So if you were to watch the video back to back, you should be able to see the things that my screen was showing. Okay. Any other? I said you can raise your hand, unmute your mic, or type in the messages section. So I want to believe that if nobody has raised their hand, no mic is on, and there's no message in the chat, then definitely there's no question up to this point. So with that, I'll take a break. Just make sure that you learn how this works out. When we come back next class, I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday and all that. We'll look at object data types. So we're going to discuss objects and we're going to discuss arrays, and we're going to discuss them in quite a big details. Okay, George, you are talking about PDF. I don't have PDF, but let me just share the HTML file that I was using to output the notes. Okay? I will give it to your class rep who will in turn share it with you guys. Okay? That's settled? Okay, so I think let's take a break at that. We'll meet again on Wednesday. Thank you very much and have a lovely rest of your evening. So immediately after this, I'm going to share invitation on your email for the next coming classes. Accept that invitation and say yes, I will attend, so that you can attend. You can access the class quietly. So whether you come late when the class is ending or you come at the beginning, that is not my concern. I just want you to come in silently without disrupting the others as we continue. So just make sure that as soon as I send that email, you are able to accept that. Then in the future classes, you'll just be able to access the class without necessarily having me admitting you. Okay? Thank you very much and bye. See you next time.